Hello everybody and welcome back to another Borderlands 3 video. My name is Nootmad and today I'll be taking you guys through some important pieces of information that I think every single Moze player should know about. So in the last episode, we broke down the Demolition Woman's skill tree and discussed how it's useful, why each skill is worth and not worth picking up, and what it synergizes as well with. So this will be the final episode of the skill tree breakdown, where I'll finally be going. Alrighty, so we finally arrived at the Bottomless Mags tree. First skill, Cloud Lead. It's a tier 1 5-pointer skill, and what it does is that it occasionally gives Moze and Iron Bear a chance to not consume ammo, as well as dealing incendiary damage. At 5 out of 5, the bonus is 11.25 incendiary damage, and the 4th shot doesn't consume ammo. So this is a pretty solid skill overall, as it gives Moze early access to an incendiary damage boost, and as a result, does so fairly consistently. This also affects Iron Bear, and the 4th shot free is also very nice, and can save you a ton of ammo, especially when coupled with a high magazine sized weapon, like a Shredder Fire for example. So, in the early game, considering the skill is only 5 points, it's a very nice skill to have. It both saves you ammo, and it does incendiary damage as well, as a lot of enemies are flesh based. This skill is also one of the skill I would usually max out to progress further on the tree, as opposed to the other two tier 1 skills you can see on the screen. So, I also want you guys to bear in mind that class mods that boost Cloud Lead won't provide you with any more free shots past the 4th. However, it will boost the damage of the incendiary shot by a linear amount. So if I had a class mod that boosts Cloud Lead by another 5, at 10 out of 5 I would get 22.5% incendiary damage, but I won't receive any more bonus shots as it will cap out at 4. So overall, it's a very nice skill to use. Now we have Dakka Bear, a single point tier 1 skill, and it's basically a meme. The damage that it does when you're in Iron Bear, or your cold buddy is riding it, is incredibly poor, and this gets no brownie points, despite Iron Bear's poor scaling. However, it has been boosted recently to boost Iron Bear damage, but even then, with the current state of Iron Bear, the skill isn't worth picking up, even though it's only 1 point. This may change, however, when the action skill changes come out, but for now, Dakka Bear is not worth picking up. Avoid in an endgame build as well, and just wait until the action skill rebalancing patch hits in this coming Thursday. So, that's Dakka Bear out of the way, now we get to match set. Yet another 5-point tier 1 skill, and it's Moze's early access to the magazine size increases. While leveling, this could provide you with a very large magazine size, which is very nice to have. As the larger your mag size is, the more nicely Redistribution will work with it. Redistribution is a skill that gives ammo regen, we'll get into that in a bit. But yeah, so with match set, a lot of people also like to run allegiance builds, and by that I mean they just use weapons from the same manufacturers, so flat off weapons, 4 melee 1 weapons, so on and so forth. And with match set, for every piece of equipped gear that has a matching manufacturer, you get extra magazine size. So as you can see, if you are running, for example, TDO build that want a very high magazine size with, match set is the best skills you can have for that, as you can boost the magazines by a lot, and in turn boost the damage of a TDO relays. So, if not, and you are using a bunch of different weapons from different manufacturers, I wouldn't recommend using this skill at all. And even then, the skill itself, in comparison to Cloud Lead, is a bit more versatile. So in most situations, I'm likely to invest 5 points in Cloud Lead, as opposed to 5 points in match set. So, those are the tier 1 skills out of the way, we move on to tier 2. First one, Stoke the Embers, 3 points. As you can see on the card, all it does is boost Moze's and Iron Bear's incendiary damage. Pretty straightforward. At max points, it gives you 3 out of 3. Gives you 30% incendiary damage. So, this skill is a very nice skill to have, especially in the early game. It's nice to have any form of incendiary boost, as the majority of enemies facing are flesh type. However, if you don't have skills that create fire damage for you, like for example, Fire and Skagden in Moze's Demolition Woman's skill tree, or Munitions in Moze's Shield of Retribution tree, the damage boost, the incendiary damage boost from Stoke the Embers isn't really that useful, especially if you aren't using any fire weapons anyway. Let's say for example, fire weapons, you have a lot of them, radiation as well, there's no point to max the skill out if you don't have any fire damage in your build. So, it's a pretty decent skill to have, but it does require the use of incendiary weapons. Not that it's a downside, but there's something you have to keep in mind. So, moving on to that, we get to one of Moze's single best skill points in the game, and it's only a 1 point, Redistribution. It's a tier 2 skill, and what it does is after scoring a critical hit, gives Moze ammo regen and health regeneration for 3 seconds. So, this is an incredible skill to have, especially this early on, and this also works with grenades as well. So grenades can crit because of pull the holy pin, and they do. It can proc redistribution, which in turn gives you ammo regeneration, health regeneration. So the utility from that is incredibly useful, and I highly recommend picking this skill up. There's never a reason to not pick this up unless, for example, TD build where you don't want ammo regen as much, because sometimes it can make reloads. But aside from that, in almost every other situation, redistribution is always a must pick. So bear in mind that redistribution also has a decreased rate of ammo regeneration with heavy weapons, so it doesn't always give you the 5% that the card says. It is a bit different with heavy weapons. But that shouldn't be a reason you shouldn't pick it up. It's still very worth to use. So, not much else to say. It's a must pick in almost every endgame build, and for a single point, it's a no-brainer. Now we move on to Scrappy, a 5-point tier 2 skill, and prior to its buff, all Scrappy did was just buff your weapon swap and handling speed. But now it also provides gun damage as well, as long as you're moving, by 30%, which is really nice to have this early in a skill tree. So, once again, while leveling, this damage boost is very nice to have, and even in endgame builds, this skill shines bright like a diamond. The weapon speed is also incredibly nice to have, and synergizes incredibly well with the fast-paced playstyle that most players would enjoy. For 5 points, I highly recommend putting at least 4 into here, with the 5th point going into redistribution. Or most of the time you have spare points anyway, so 1 in Redist, 5 in Scrappy is always a good decision. So, those are the tier 2 skills out of the way. Now we're moving to tier 3, and we get to Rushin Offensive. Ultimately, it's a very nice mobility skill. For a single point, it also gives you some significant lifesteal. 8% is nothing to scoff at, so if you have the option to pick it up, I recommend you do so. However, since its recent buff that gave it lifesteal, the skill itself has been bugged and doesn't always work as smoothly as it used to, so it's up to you whether or not you want to use it. However, once this does get fixed, I highly recommend picking the skill up. Being able to sprint while shooting is just such a nice quality of life change, and yeah, just synergizes very well with a run and gun playstyle that most players use. So now we get to Scorching RPMs. It's yet again another very nice 5-pointer skill, and you notice this trend in the tree. So, 5-pointer skill, and it boosts Iron Bear's damage and Moze's critical hit damage, as well as fire rate. However, not much else to say. Max the skill out wherever possible, unless you're tweaking weapons to fire infinitely, in which case you have to micromanage fire rate, mag size, the points you put in cloud of lead for example. But I'll be making a video later on that will cover how to perfectly optimize that regen for Moze and the weapons you have equipped for build. Now, as I've already said in multiple times in my other videos, some forms of Iron Bear damage does buff short fuse, and Scorching RPMs is one of them. However, this buff does not apply to Auto Bear, just Iron Bear. So, moving on from tier 3s, we get to our tier 4s, and we hit on Iron Bank. It's a very nice magazine size increase to say. There's nothing else to say if I'm honest. Just avoid using COB weapons with this skill, as for some reason it makes the weapons heat up faster, resulting in a tactical net loss of DPS. I did cover this in episode 1 of my Ultimate Moze Guide series, so if you guys want to see that in a bit more detail, feel free to check it out. I'll put the link for that video in the description below. But yeah, other than that, the skill is very useful for any Bottomless Mags type build, and I always recommend picking it up at least a couple points whenever you're speccing down into the tree. So, moving on from Iron Bank, we get to Specialist Bear. Very straightforward skill, because the hardpoint category is the same, Specialist will work. So what I'm saying is, as long as you have something 2 salamander augments equipped, it will. So you don't need to have 2 fuel economy augments, for example. You can have 1 chemical warfare, and you'll still get the specialist damage boost. So yeah, it's a solid 1-point skill. I would almost always recommend picking it up if you have spare points. So, moving on from Specialist Bear, we now get to our tier 5s, and we get on some for the road. Infinite ammo for 5 seconds, and that's basically the cell zone. Reason not to pick it up, it's a single point, and especially if you're this far down the tree, you'll have points to spare, so I highly recommend investing. Boosting this skill with a com to 2 out of 1 for example, I just want to point out that it'll only give you an extra second of infinite ammo, totaling it to 6 seconds. So just keep that in mind. Again, if you have a class mod that some for the road, you'll only get 6 seconds of infinite ammo instead of the 10 seconds that. So, Moving from that, we get to another damage skill in Moze's tree, and that's Click Click. What this does is that the lower her magazine size gets, the more gun damage it gets. So this is a linear scale, much like Desperate Measures, and this is a bit of a weird skill, in the sense that its potential is heavily dependent on the guns you're using. So for example, guns like a Shredder Fire, with enough points in Forge, Iron Bank, and Redistribution, you'll be getting so much ammo regen that your ammo count will never go down below max. But guns like Sandhawk, for example, that are ammo hungry and chew through your reserves, can benefit quite well from Click Click. So once again, the damage boost is linear, much like Desperate Measures in the Shield Retribution tree, which gives most gun damage based on how low health is. So much like that, in the case of Click Click, the percentage of the damage boost you get from Click Click will be whatever percent of ammo left in your mag. For example, if I have 50% of my ammo left in my bag, I'll be getting 50% of 60% gun damage, so I'll be getting a 30% gun damage boost. And this damage will increase the more my ammo goes down in my magazine. So, that's Click Click. Now we finally touch on the Capstone Forge. A very straightforward skill, it's just constant ammo regeneration. However, much like Redistribution, it has a decreased rate of ammo regeneration for weapons, but that shouldn't sway you away from picking it up. However, if you are speccing into a full launcher build, I wouldn't recommend it because it is a point. However, for any other Bottomless Mags, I highly recommend picking it up. So as that, this ammo regen doesn't really synergize well with low magazine size weapons like the Maggie, for example, so typically you want to have very high magazine size weapons to work this skill effectively. Once again, I'll be making a video on how to tweak and optimize your ammo regeneration with Moze, so you can fire most guns as possible. There is a bit of finesse and a formula to it, but I'll break that all down. So yeah, that's it for the video tonight. I hope you guys found it informative. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments section below, or you can always join my Discord as well. I'm always hanging out in there with a bunch of other Moze players. Prismatic is one of them, and he's been a massive source of information for all my prior videos. So if you want to pick our brains, feel free to join the Discord and ask questions like no tomorrow. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay on top of all my new videos. And anyway, I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya!